Do you want to make your home smarter and more energy efficient, which will end up saving you both money and time? Then you're going to love this episode with lifelong tech enthusiast Matt Ferrell, who is a pro on this topic and has more than 1 million subscribers on his YouTube channel, where he explores how smart and sustainable technology can impact our lives for the better. If you like what you're watching, please don't forget to click that thumbs up and hit subscribe to help the algorithm. So let's get into it. Matt, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It took a while for this to come together, but I'm glad we're finally able to have this conversation.
Yeah, well, we were in the middle of trying to decide whether we wanted to make some big energy savings and monitoring investments. So I was like, well, let's wait. And finally it got to the point that I was like, I think with technology evolving and, just budgets changing, that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be another thing we all want to add to our homes.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, this is kind of like when it comes to like smart home monitoring, it's like we're at the very early stages, and it's just like all these different companies are rolling out with all this crazy stuff that you can put in your home right now to monitor your energy, improve your battery usage, solar panels, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a crazy time right now.
Yeah. Now you've been doing this for years, but I think if I'm not incorrect, you're in the process, or maybe you're even done with a new home where you're completely rethought everything. So I feel like for a lot of us, this happens over time, but for you right now, you've probably thought about every element all in one short period of time.
Yeah, I'm actually in my new studio right now. Just moved into the house 3.5 weeks ago, I think it was. So we just got in. It took about 2 years to pull this whole house together. But yeah, I've thought about every little nook and cranny of this house, all the different smart tech I want to put into it, the solar panel, energy storage, all that kind of stuff.
I thought one of the things you really, really know well is around the energy and the efficiency of a home. So we'll start there. And then I want to jump into all the other home automation, smart home stuff, and anything else we didn't cover. So let's just start at the basics. Can you kind of cover what are the principles, like first principles of just building a more energy efficient home and why that's important?
The first place you start is creating an airtight house. You want a house to be as airtight and well insulated as you can. If you don't have a airtight house, it doesn't matter what kind of tech you put into it, what kind of solar panels you put on it. If it can't hold on to its heat energy or keep heat out efficiently, your energy use is going to go through the roof. So you have to make sure that you're building it right to make sure that it meets certain standards. And one of those is passive house. There's a passive house standard that is very popular around the world. It's gaining ground. I did not build my house to passive house certification, but I took a lot of the underlying principles into mind when putting this house together. And I worked with a company that was able to meet kind of close to passive house level airtightness, insulation values to make sure that every watt of energy I spend to heat this house stays in the house as long as it can.
And is that something that applies only to new homes? Or if I'm sitting, which right now is about 100-year-old home, is this still something I can aspire to achieve?
Oh yeah, you can do this you can retrofit old houses. And in a lot of areas, there's you can basically bring in an energy kind of guide. Usually like in my area, I'm in Massachusetts, there's a program called Mass Save, and it's a free service through the state. And you have an energy person that comes in, evaluates your home and tells you, they'll give you recommendations of what to do. They'll tell you exactly what you have to do to get your house a little more airtight, a little more well insulated to try to achieve these kind of things. And it's not like some massive, huge, you have to spend $100,000 to do it. There's a lot of low hanging fruit that you can really do on a house that's 100 years old to make it way, way better.
Yeah. And I actually got an email from a listener in Arkansas who had a similar program where the state kind of had someone come out, but they also paid for it. So they spent a couple $1,000s to re-insulate his attic, which blows my mind. He told me in the email, he said, I saved about $2,000, but I'm not sure if they'll be able to do that for you in California.
It's the same thing here with Mass Save. It's like I did it on my old house. That house was built in the 1950s. And we had somebody come in, they said, you need some more insulation and we can blow some insulation in. And they covered, I think it was 60% of the cost of doing it all. So at the end of the day, my wife and I, we paid, I think it was like $4,000 or $5,000, and we got $10,000 worth of work done. And it made a huge difference after it was done. And it wasn't like a huge expense.
Is there a thing you would call that program for someone searching? Obviously, if it's Massachusetts, it's Mass Save. But is it energy efficiency, or what would you search online if someone was in Colorado?
That's a good question. I think it would probably be, you'd be searching for something along the lines of energy evaluation, perhaps, energy efficiency programs in your area. That's something along those lines.
So that's a big misconception. I think most people think, I got to save money on home energy usage. Let's buy smart plugs. And it sounds like, no, let's go old school. Let's make sure your home's airtight. So let's go through that. Are there a few, even without having someone come out, a few places that make homes less airtight that you can focus on yourselves? Is it windows? Is it insulation in the attic?
It's windows, doors, and your attic. Because oftentimes you'll find that there's not enough insulation in your attic. And so it's like you can have somebody come in, just if it's blown in insulation, it's really easy to do that. And it doesn't cost that much money. But windows and doors are like the biggest one. Check the air seals on the bottom of your door. A good friend of mine who's out in California, he moved into a new house and he sent me a picture of what it looked like under his door. And he had a gap that was like easily an inch from the bottom of the door to the floor. And it was just sunlight just coming in. And it was just like, if you have gaps like that, just go to Home Depot, Lowe's, some like local store, and just get some new gaskets that you can put on the bottom of your door, seals around it, and you'll be surprised how much of a difference that can make.
Okay. What are some of the other big kind of 80-20 principle things to do to affect your home energy?
The biggest use of energy comes from heating and cooling, for sure. So if you really want to trim back your energy use, you really should be like not, if it's the middle of summer and you're trying to stay cool and you like it 70 degrees, maybe try 72, maybe try 74. It's like even just 1 degree of difference can actually make knock your bill down 5%, 10%. So just go a little warmer or a little cooler, depending on what time of year it is and where you live. That makes a huge difference. The other thing you can do that actually costs no money. If you live in an area, like I know in California, you have time of use rates. That's not everywhere. But if you really want to save a lot of money, shift how and when you're spending that money, that energy. So for instance, in California, time of use rates is super cheap overnight. Well, what you can do is you could like over air condition your house overnight and then basically turn the system off during the day and let your house gradually come back up to temperature. So you're not using any energy during the day when you're trying to stay cool because you pre-cooled your house overnight. You're basically using your entire house as basically just a giant thermal battery. It's the same thing where I live. Like in the middle of winter, I could overheat my house overnight and let it gradually cool over the course of the day during the winter if I wanted to try to save electricity use with time of use rates.
Yeah, and what you're saying, in California, PG&E gives you multiple rate options, right? There's like 4 or 5 rate plans where we live and where my sister lives. You can choose different time of use rates. In a lot of states, it's here's the rate and that's what you pay. But just to set some expectations, here's a rate from, and the plan we're on, which is EV2B or something, they have names and there's so many of them, from midnight until 3 p.m. we pay the lowest rates. And then from 3 p.m. to midnight, we pay the highest rates. So our goal is like, if we're going to set as inconsequential as this probably is in the grand scheme of things, if we're doing dishes, we set the dishwasher and we just time delay it to run at midnight. Like if we're charging the car, we charge it after midnight. All the things we can do, we try to push them off to happen before 3 or after midnight. And so definitely PG&E is really nice. They actually they won't do this proactively, but on the website, you can say, run what my bill would have been for the last year on all the plans and tell me which plan would have been the cheapest.
Oh, that is cool.
Really cool. I will say, if you're going to make a lot of changes, maybe make those changes for a month and run the simulation on last month, because if you're willing to make changes, the plan that makes sense might not be the one that would have made sense before you implemented those changes, but that's a great one.
What's the cost difference between the different rates that you're seeing?
So I want to say the cost difference is about 2x on our rate plan. It's quite expensive. I'm pulling up the EV2B plan. It is 29 cents from, oh, wow, this is not, I'm on EV2B, but as an example, there is an EVB plan, which is different. And it's 29 cents from midnight to 7 a.m., 40 cents per kilowatt hour from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., and then 64 cents from 2 to 9 p.m. So wow. 29 to 64 is the range. But I think we're on EV2 maybe 2A. I can't remember the name of the rate plan we're on, but I just know that ours doesn't have that exact those exact time windows, unless it's changed, in which case I need to reset how we're using our energy.
Yeah, where I am, I don't have time of use rates yet. I heard they're coming. We just don't have them yet. I was actually just out in Vancouver, and I was talking to some people that they have time of use rates up in Vancouver, but the difference is not like what you just described. It might be like 12 cents versus 9 cents. So it's like a really tiny gap.
And another great thing, one benefit of an electric car is that, the cost of electricity is often cheaper than the cost of gas. Another is that in California, at least, you can get on an electric vehicle rate plan for your home. And that peak pricing is a shorter window and a lower price.
Okay.
So like I mentioned, we go from 12 to 3 at 28 cents. And then we have 59 cents from 4 to 9 and 48 cents at the other times. We're kind of in the weeds right here, so I'll bring it back, but definitely worth, if you are in a state that has different plans, figuring out which ones make the most sense. I'll bring it back. You said heating and air. I'm going to go through a few things of my thoughts because we never had a air conditioner when we moved in. And so we added air conditioning. And as we were going through this process, we noticed that there was a lot of inefficiency in our ductwork, like an incredible amount that we had no idea. And so I was talking with a friend of mine, and she was saying she had someone come in and say, wow, your ducts are really inefficient. Everything about your system's bad. We can replace the whole thing for this much. And then she called another person. They said, well, actually, what we can do is we can seal off all the vents and we can just spray something into your ducts. And it will do 90% of what replacing everything would have done for 10% of the cost. So I don't know if you've had any experience with, I don't even remember what they spray into these ducts, but there are a lot of different options for how you modify and build an HVAC system. And then, I'll just share a few HVAC hacks, and then I want to hear yours just because I wrote this list. Another one was we have this room I'm in right now gets significantly less airflow than other rooms. And so when it used to be a bedroom, if you wanted someone to sleep here because it's on the ground floor, you'd have to crank the heat up in the rest of the house. And so one option is if your ducts are really accessible, you can add a fan in your ducts, which will turn on when it senses certain temperature air and blow air to try to help redistribute the air. Or you can get a register fan, which is what we have. So the vent actually has a fan built in. And when it senses cool or hot air based on a desired temperature, it will suck that air in faster to try to help distribute things around the house. So that was one big one that we had. And then the other is just, we got a lot of quotes. When we added air conditioning, the quotes were like 2 to 3x difference for people doing the same thing. And so, I don't know, those are a few of mine. What do you think about when you think about an efficient HVAC system?
Oh man, it's the ductwork is a big one. My old house, the ductwork was not sealed well. So all the joints were leaking air. And so one side of the house was always hot and the other side of the house was always cold. And we were always trying those hacks of, you kind of semi-close the registers on one side to try to force more pressure to get to the other side of the house. But when you do that, you can throw the HVAC system kind of out of balance, which is not good for the system as a whole. So the idea of the fan is a great one. It's a nice hack. I'm going to get into the pricey options really quick when I say this, but it's like heat pump all the things.
Let's talk about that, because that was a question that we had when we were talking to all these HVAC people about, do we want to do a heat pump? And unsophisticatedly came to the conclusion, no. Now feeling like I regret it, but talk about heat pumps.
Heat pumps are the most energy efficient way to generate heat or air conditioning, hands down. Nothing comes close. It feels like it breaks the laws of physics, because if you're talking about electric resistive heat, it's like for every unit of energy you put in, you get 1 unit of heat energy out. But with a heat pump, it's not generating the heat in that kind of conversion. It's just moving it. So it's taking heat from the air that's outside your house and it's moving it inside the house and using a compressor to amplify it. So for every unit of energy you put into the system, you're getting 3 or 4 units of energy of heat back out. And that's the same for, air conditioning if you're doing a reverse of that. So heat pumps are just the most efficient thing you can do. The downside is they tend to be more expensive up front. So when you're trying to price it, it may look like a little bit of sticker shock of oh my God, what am I doing? This is, 30% more expensive than this other system that's less efficient. Why would I do that? You're talking about time frames. So it's like, what's that payback period? So heat pumps might take 3, 5, 6 years to kind of like earn their keep. But then after that point, you're just saving gobs and gobs of energy and money after that point.
And would that replace a furnace and an air conditioner unit, or what does the heat pump replace?
It replaces everything. It's like a heat pump. Heat pump goes both ways. Like in my new house, I have a geothermal heat pump, which is instead of extracting heat from the air, it's extracting heat from deep in the earth. There's a 400-foot well that was drilled in my yard, and then they basically just ran a pipe, a tube, down that 400 feet back up again, and it's got a liquid that goes through it, and it's like a giant water-cooled PC, if you know about PCs. But it's like you're basically just taking, if you want to air condition, you're taking the heat from the inside of the house, you're dumping it into the earth, and the earth is cooling down that liquid. So when it comes back up into the house, that's being used to cool your house. And then the reverse in winter, if I'm trying to get hot air in the house, it's extracting the heat from the earth and bringing it in and amplifying it. So it's one system that does both.
Okay. And what would an upgrade cost be if someone just has a standard house? Is this like tens of thousands, thousands?
It's a loaded question because it depends, because there's so many different kinds of heat pumps. You can get air source heat pumps, which are the cheapest. If you want to go super, I don't want to call it cheap, but like they're still really good, is like a ductless mini split system. That's probably the most affordable way to get a heat pump system into your house as a retrofit. It's going to still be more expensive than a typical house. So let's say a typical heating system might cost you $10,000 for an upgrade. This might cost you $14,000 or $13,000 or something like that. If you want to flip into what I did, geothermal, your eyes will pop out of your head. The sticker shock kicks in very fast because they can get very expensive, because it comes down to the drilling of the well. That whole system, that whole side of it is expensive. The mechanicals in my house are not the expensive part. The really expensive part is drilling wells and doing all the stuff you have to do outside to get it to work.
But at the end of the day, if you live in you live in Massachusetts, it gets hot in the summer and cold in the winter. You're using your heating and air conditioning quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
We're using our air conditioning so little that living in the Bay Area, we didn't have it for the first 12 years. So like, it's temperate enough that we don't need it that often. The heat also doesn't run that often. So I think if I remember right, the reason why we ended up not doing a heat pump was that the less you use your heating and air conditioning, the less, the longer our return investment will take. And I think for us, it's days a year that we use heating and air conditioning. So it didn't make that much sense.
Yeah, it's something I always tell people when they ask me, should I get solar panels? It's like, I can't answer that for you. You have to figure it out yourself, because it's such a personal thing. Like, it makes so much sense for me for solar and geothermal in my current place right now. But like where you live, a heat pump, the expense of that would make no sense. You live in an area that's very comfortable for large periods of the year, and you wouldn't need an air conditioner for a long period of time. It would take you forever to earn your money back on that. So it doesn't make sense in your situation. So yeah, 100%.
Well, we'll come back to solar, but general other bang for your buck. I'll throw one out. In our last house, so one of the nice things we did, maybe now's a good time to talk about energy monitoring. We didn't have any sophisticated energy monitoring at my last condo, except that PG&E, the electrical utility company, had smart meters. And so you could buy something for relatively inexpensive, under $100, that would let you get streaming data from PG&E from your smart meter to see how your energy usage was going. And we were like, gosh, why are we using so much energy? And so we just kind of went around the house, totally unsophisticated. And we unplugged the fridge, plugged in the fridge. We tried stuff. And then we turned off the lights, and we saw the electricity in the house drop in half. And we had these crazy halogen lights that were using up, when we turned on the lights, the energy double or tripled depending on how many rooms we're on. And so we realized just replacing all these lights with LEDs cut our energy usage in half. Now, we weren't using a ton of energy because, keep in mind, Bay Area, we didn't have air conditioning. We weren't using a lot of heat, but for us, that was a big one. Is that something that is unique to whatever lights they put in this house, or is that a big savings option for people?
That's a huge savings option for people. I don't think people realize how much money they're spending on lighting. You just don't think about it. It's going to sound like I'm making a horrible pun, but I'm not. like with knowledge comes power. It's like knowing how your energy is being used in your house. Just that alone is massive. Like you talked about that device. It's like one of the first devices I got was called a Sense, where you installed into an electric panel. It costs like, I think when I got it, it was a couple $100 and it cost like $100 to have it installed. So I think it was like $300 all in. And then it has, I'll say AI that kind of is hit or miss, but it kind of tries to identify things that it's detecting on your home. So it will say, it can figure out, oh, that's probably your HVAC system. That's probably your air conditioner. That's probably your microwave. And it can start to tell you like your current use is this. And it will also tell you an always on category that you're spending 350 watts constantly. It's always running in the background. And when I found that out, I was like, where the hell is that 350 watts going? Like what is using all that energy? So I did the same thing, going around my house, turning things off. Like there's a period where I would turn everything off in the house. And I looked at, okay, the house is down to 5 watts. I don't know where that 5 watts is coming from, but it's 5 watts. And then it was like slowly turning things back on to figure out where that energy was coming from. And it was similar to you. It was like, there was some lighting that was running that took more energy than we expected because it wasn't LED. There was a dehumidifier at one point that we discovered was kind of running rogue. We thought it was on a schedule that was running in our garage, which could get kind of damp. We thought it was only running a few hours a day, but it turned out it was running like 12 hours a day overnight when we were asleep and we didn't know it. And so it was like wasting gobs of electricity. So it was like, when you know where the energy use is going in your house, it can be huge. And you don't have to spend hundreds. You can get a device called a kilowatt. You can buy them on Amazon for like $25. And it's basically just like one side's got the prongs, you put it into an outlet, and then the other side's got you plug something into it, and it will show you exactly how many watts that thing you plugged in is using. So if you're curious how much a lamp is using, you can literally plug your lamp into this, plug it into the wall, and then you can monitor how much energy it's using over the next 24 hours and then determine, oh, wow, I could save some money by changing that lamp out or that bulb out. So there's some very affordable ways to track this stuff down.
Yeah, when we moved into this house, the previous owner installed a Sense system and left it. On the downside, you don't get that always on category gives you no data. So I don't know where it's coming from, what it's doing, but I could go turn off a lamp, and maybe a lamp's not enough to get a good sense of, whether it's having a huge impact, but I can certainly turn on all the lights off, turn all the lights on, turn on the furnace, turn off the furnace, run the oven. This house for some reason has 2 ovens and a countertop oven. So we have like 3. It's like, which oven is actually the most expensive? And I always thought it was one, and I was totally wrong. We tested these 2 ovens. 2 of them were electric, and we were like, wow, one of them is actually much more efficient. I haven't gotten to the point to monitor gas usage to tell whether the gas or the electric oven is cheaper. So that's like a level 2 game that I haven't played. But I was blown away testing a lot of things. Since you've done it, I've always heard, you leave the TV plugged in, you leave the computer plugged in, even if they're off, they're still draining energy. While that might be true, is that really where people should focus their time and energy? Or is it really about finding the major things that are causing drain?
It's the major things. It's like you want to hit the low-hanging fruit. Like I mentioned my dehumidifier. When we figured that out, it was like, wow, we saw our energy use decrease by like 20% just by making that one tweak. When you were talking about a television set, it might be pulling 2-3 watts. So it's like, it does matter. It's like, but if you have multiple TVs and multiple game consoles and things like that, they're all sucking 2, 3, 5 watts at, it does add up, but that's not where I would start at all. It's not going to make a huge dent. There's like diminishing returns. And that's when you start to get to that lower tier, is around that point.
And what about better appliances, like switching from a 20-year-old electric washer dryer to a new one, or refrigerators or dishwashers? Is that a huge opportunity to save?
Yes, 100%. Especially like I mentioned, heat pump all the things. In our new house, we got a heat pump clothes dryer, which uses way less electricity than our previous dryer did. Like it's night and day how much power this thing uses. Way less than half. There's so many different things you can get with it. Like, the Energy Star certificates here in the US, there's usually a yellow sticker on every appliance that gives you an estimate as to how much it will cost you over the course of a year. You have to take those with a grain of salt, but at least it's an apples to apples comparison between appliances. And there's huge differences between refrigerators and washing machines and things that you can get that way. So you definitely want to pay attention to those stickers and get the most energy efficient appliance you can.
And is there a rule of thumb or just a general principle on gas versus electric? I mean, I know it's probably very dependent on where you live and rates, but if someone's out there deciding, do I want an electric heat pump or gas dryer? Sounds like heat pump's probably the way to go, but let's set that aside and go with the two standard electric or gas dryer. How would you think about that decision?
That's a tough one because gas tends to be crazy cheap. So if you're just looking at dollars, it's like it depends on where you live and what your electricity rates are. Gas may just win hands down, but I would say 99% of the time, it's going to probably be electric would end up being your best bet for something like a clothes dryer, even a non-heat pump version. Just because they tend to be safer. That's another thing. Gas dryers are fire, clothing, lint, doesn't go well together. But electric tends to be, I would say, the better bet, depending which way you're going.
What about heating? We talked about heating and cooling the house, but what about heating and cooling the water in the house? I guess just heating, because I guess we don't really cool our water.
Yeah. On that again, it's the same thing with like the gas prices, things like that. Depends on where you live. In my area, going electric, again, heat pump all the things, heat pump water heaters, 300% efficient for every unit of energy you put in with what you get out. With stuff like that, you can easily save money with an electric system over a gas system. But if you're talking just a plain old electric non-heat pump version, it's going to be, it still might be in your favor to go gas. But again, safety, you still have toxic fumes that could potentially leak into your house. So there's health considerations when you're talking about gas inside your house that you want to take into account. But for most of it, I would say it's a heat pump water heater would definitely be the winner.
And are those tankless, or is this a kind of 2x2 matrix? Because in my mind, it was like you could go with electric tankless or tank and gas, but I guess I never processed that maybe there were two other options. There's
other options. They're often called hybrid water heaters. So like I have a Rheem heat pump water heater. It looks like any water heater you would have seen, just a big old tank, but it seems to have like a little hat on top of it. It's got this it goes a little taller. That taller portion is the heat pump just sitting on top of the tank. That's all it is. And there's a resistive heater inside, a resistant element inside the water heater, just like a regular electric water heater. So it's kind of a hybrid mode. And you can also get heat pump systems that are also natural gas. So these hybrid systems can tap into gas or electric with the heat pump hat on top of it. So there's a lot of options you can look at. They tend to be more expensive than just straight up gas or straight up electric. But when you're talking about over the course of 10 years, water heater lasts about 10 years, they're going to come out ahead for sure.
But you still have a tank. Is that right?
Yes, I still have a 40-gallon tank with that little heat pump hat on top of it. And then to complicate matters for my new house, it's actually tied into my geothermal system for my heating and cooling. So my heating and cooling system, when it's running, a compressor is running, it's generating heat from the compressor itself. So what the system does is it captures that waste heat from the HVAC system and pumps that over into what's called a desuperheater tank and basically creates free hot water for me. And then that desuperheater tank feeds into a regular water heater tank. So I actually have two tanks in my mechanical room. One's the desuperheater tank that feeds into this heat pump water heater. And so the combination of the desuperheater, which produces roughly half of your hot water needs for free, essentially for free, tied into a heat pump water heater, which is 300% efficient. It's like all of that stuff ties in together. The amount of money I'll be spending on my hot water in my house, the estimate is like, no joke, it's like $50 a year or something like that. It's something crazy, crazy low that I'm going to be spending on hot water.
I think now's a good time to tell everyone, if anyone wants to go a little bit deeper on any one of these topics, I'm pretty sure you have a video on every single one of them on the YouTube channel, and then a conversation that ensues on the podcast. So I'll just flag that for anyone here that if you're like, oh, I want to know more about this heat pump water heater, I'm pretty sure you've made a video about it because I think I watched it. And so there's a lot more to get there. A couple more last things here. So I read this thing that the Department of Energy said, which was that if you replace your filters regularly on your air conditioner, it could save your energy consumption anywhere from 5 to 15%. Does that seem reasonable? Like that seems like, goes in the first step thing. Wow, just filters, cut your energy by 5 to 15%. Seems kind of crazy.
I have not heard that stat. That's new to me, but it makes sense because the older a filter gets, it gets filled up with lint and dust and becomes less efficient. So the system has to work harder to move air through it. So it does make sense that if you change that frequently, the air is going to move more freely, which means less energy use. It makes sense. I could totally see it being the case.
And are you regularly changing filters? Because I imagine there's got to be at least a decent number of people listening that are like, I haven't changed my filter in 5 years.
For me, my motivation for change, I have really bad allergies. So we changed the filters on the schedule that we're supposed to do. So it's like every 6 months or a year, you're supposed to be changing certain filters out. Maybe it's every 3 to 6 for others. It's like we're always living by that, mainly because of my allergy problems. So I've been a beneficiary of that savings, and I didn't realize it.
The other hack I have here, and then if you have any other little ones, is that there are a lot of people that leave their water heater too hot. And the first time that most people realize this is when you have children, and one of the recommendations they have, you have kids, turn down your water heater temp. And I just realized that there are some people that to get to the hottest temperature they ever need, it's 100%. And for some people, it's to get to the hottest temperature, it's like 70%. So if your shower and sink and everything go way hotter than you ever need, then you're probably spending energy, whether that's electricity or gas, you're spending energy to heat that tank up so much and then not using as much of it as you need. And you're probably overspending. So I'd say dial it back until you maybe have gotten too far, and then you can bring it up. I remember as a kid, when we were leaving for a trip for a week or two, we would dial the hot water heater all the way back to nothing and then turn it back on when we got home. And so that was like one of the home energy hacks, was like when you're gone, now, you've got away mode on your Nest, which makes that easy, but you can also turn back the temperature on your water heater.
Yeah, that's a really smart recommendation. On top of which, some of these new water heaters, like the one I just got from Rheem, it has a smart app that you can install to it and check it, and it will tell you how many kilowatts you're using on your hot water. So it can you can gamify it that same way, adjusting the temperature, seeing how it affects the hot water spend you're doing. But it also has a vacation mode on it. And I've never seen this on a water heater before, where it's like I could I'm going on a trip for 2 weeks. I could do exactly what you're talking about, put it into vacation mode, and it dials the temperature way back to save you energy. This stuff is getting kind of crazy.
Have you noticed, is there any way to monitor, like smart monitoring, like Sense or something like that, for gas?
I have not come across one. Honestly, it's like everything I've come across is like I've found add-ons you can put onto water heaters so that you can monitor your water. Like I had a gas water heater and it could tell me how much gas I was using on that water heater, but I've never seen one that you could add to see how much your whole house is using and where it's going and all that kind of stuff. I've never seen that. I wish there was one. That'd be nice.
I have seen on water, there's a Flume is one device that my brother-in-law has that just monitors how much water is using, which in his case, there was a leak in there somewhere. And he got alerted to it, and it was it would have cost hundreds of dollars, and he got an alert and he figured it out quickly. So sometimes those systems are great as well.
Yeah, I used a fin. It's just like the Flume. I used a fin in my old house. I'm going to have a fin in my new house as well. It hasn't been installed yet, but it's fantastic to be able to know exactly how much water you're using, and it can detect even just like a slow drip that's coming from something in your house and alert you to that. It can save you a lot of money.
Yeah. And I think we'd be remiss if we talked about all this monitoring. One of the things we originally connected on that was one of the things we were considering installing was a span, which is like, if you want to take Sense to the next level, you can replace your entire, what is it? Why am I blanking on the name? Yeah, your circuit panel. You can replace the whole thing and get a per circuit level monitoring, which I think you've done.
Yep.
Is that really just like the creme de la creme of home energy monitoring?
It is. The argument of if it's necessary or not comes up a lot because it is a costly venture to put one of these things in. But like we talked about the Sense, it gives you the information, but it's up to you to really make the decisions or to track things down. Where when you have per circuit monitoring, it's not just more granular, but you can also set up automations and turn specific circuits on and off depending on what's going on in your home. These kind of electric panels that are smart, can actually take it to the next step and be proactive in how they're reacting to what's going on in your house, where the sense is just information that you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to see, and this dovetails nicely to where I want to go, that if, we have solar and we have a battery, if all of a sudden you lose power, Sense would automatically go in and say, oh, let's turn these things off to make your battery last Span would go in. Span would go in and say, let's turn all these things off to make sure your battery and your solar can get you as far as possible. And right now, little things like I need the circuit breaker flipped and I can go change it, or I want to turn something off remotely and fix it and turn it back on. I just want someone to come and actually label them. Our 100-year-old house, these circuits are so mislabeled that I actually have no idea what about half of them are. And we've tried going around the house to figure out what they are, and I have no idea. So if there is a service where someone will just come out and figure out what they are, I would love it.
Have you done that thing where one person's in the room and the other person's at the panel and you're like yelling at each other or talking over the phone of like, okay, I turned it off. Did it go off? No. Okay, try a different one.
And we even bought this thing that you like plug into an outlet and you just run this thing along the circuit wall and it'll beep when it's there, but it's not very accurate. And so we have some ways to go, but that dovetails nicely. So one way to save money on energy is to reduce your usage. We talked briefly. Another one is to dial in your rate plan to match your usage. But a whole nother one is to just produce your own energy. So I moved into a home with solar, so I didn't have to make a decision, but you've had to make that decision. So how do you think about when it makes sense to kind of produce your own energy? Maybe there's another option. I remember there was this one house in San Francisco that had a wind turbine on the roof. But how do you think about solar as an option and when it makes sense?
Yeah, I've done this twice now. I did it on my old house and I've done it on this house. The solar just got installed a week and a half ago on my new house. It's still not turned on yet. But the way I look at it is you have to have a clear set of goals that you want to do. Like, what are your goals? Are you just looking to save money on your energy bill and come out ahead? Or are you concerned about climate change? Whatever. Are you looking for energy security because power goes out in your neighborhood several times a year because there's big storms that come through and knock down power lines? What is it that you're trying to solve for? And once you have that criteria, it becomes very easy to decide if solar is right for you or not. And it's kind of what I said earlier of like, I can't say everybody should go solar because it may not fit your goals. So for like me in my personal situation, I was looking for energy security and to save some money over the long term. So it's like I wasn't looking for a short-term goal for saving money. But in my areas where I live here in Massachusetts, we get, ice storms that come through, bad storms in the winter that sometimes knock out maybe power lines. My old house, we still, we haven't had the closing yet in the old house, but I still have the span in my old house. And I got a notification yesterday because it was a Hurricane Lee just came up the East Coast of the United States and took out power for where my old house is. And I got the notification from Span saying, hey, your house is on backup right now. Here's how long it will last given its current use. And since there's nobody there, it was like, it'll last for 2.5 days. So it didn't really matter. But you want to get solar if those are your goals. And it's really easy to kind of calculate what size of system you need to do based on those goals, how much you want to save. You can just dial it in based on your budget, how much energy you're trying to knock down. It's pretty easy to figure it out once you've got those goals listed up.
Can financing be a good option to defer that cost or kind of make the ROI happen earlier? Or does it feel, I never really understood whether solar financing was like predatory or helpful.
It is predatory. If you're talking about, there's like basically three main ways. You're paying for cash, you're getting a loan, or you're doing some kind of lease. And it's when you get into the lease territory where it becomes very predatory. And it really depends on what business you're talking to and what they're trying to push. I do not recommend leases at all because what ends up happening is they put a lien in your home. If you need to sell your house and move away, you have to figure that out. You're either going to have pay to have the solar panels removed if the new owner doesn't want them, or the new owner has to basically take that lease over from you. And not a lot of buyers that are buying a house don't necessarily want to do that. So it can kind of put you into a very bad position. Or if you have a loan or paid cash, it doesn't have that same onus on you. It's like if you have a loan, when you go to sell your house, you can use the proceeds from the sale of the house to pay off the loan so that the new homeowner doesn't have to do anything when they come in. So those are the ways I would recommend doing it. But the fastest way for payoff is with cash, which of course, very expensive, hard to do. So there's a lot of loans out there that have very low interest rates. A lot of states across the country have programs that can help you find extremely low interest rate loans to help you cover the costs. So there are ways to find very good financing for it.
Yeah. And we mentioned earlier some of the programs that'll come in and evaluate your home. There are also a ton of rebates and incentives for lower cost appliances. In certain counties in California, you can get, I think we got our Ratio, which is like a water irrigation system. It was free from the county based on the fact that it helps your home. So I'll just replug that. Make sure you go look at your utility site, your county site, and see what programs there are, because there's a lot of stuff, whether it's low interest loans or devices or discounts that you can get.
How did you like that device? How did it work out for you?
So we have like a drip irrigation system, and we just replaced whatever that company is that everyone seems to have, Rain something, with Ratio. And it's really nice. You can walk around the yard, especially when you're trying to test something, and you just kind of open the app and say, run zone 4. And then you go back, oh, that's why there's water on our patio in the morning. It's right here. I think similar. I don't think it's functionally that different, but when we were talking to someone who was helping put in a couple trees because some died, we were able to figure out, okay, well, let's run this. Let's see if it's getting too much. Let's dial it back to 10 minutes instead of 15 minutes. And it was just a lot easier than, going to a machine and like turning a dial on how often it runs on each zone. So I thought it was great. I wouldn't say it's changed our lives. I think a lot of the smart home stuff, which we'll get to, the benefits of it, are that you don't have to think about it as opposed to something you use every day.
Right. Yeah. I was asking because it's like, I've heard that's a good way to save on water usage. So it makes sense that they'd be offering it to you for free because it can really help cut down on how much water is getting used, especially in an area where water might be a very scarce thing.
Yeah. It's especially good because it's like, oh, it rained. We're not going to run irrigation. And that I think is the big feature that the city loves, is you're not going to be using water when there's rain, which a system that was based off dials would obviously just not have any knowledge of the rain, and it would just keep running.
Yeah. I mean, to add on that really quick, it's like your call out to talking to utilities. It's like when I was just in Vancouver, the utility up there, they give you a device that's like that Sense Energy Monitor for free. And when you log into your utility account, it shows you live monitoring. It shows you how it's breaking down, all that kind of stuff. It's like this stuff doesn't just benefit you, it benefits the utility, which is why a lot of these places are offering these systems for free.
Yeah, when it comes to solar, to come back there are government tax credits that you get and a lot of things. I'm not an expert there because we didn't have, you might be, you went through the process, but we already had it when we moved in, so we didn't have to think about it.
Yeah, well, it depends on where you live, but like here in Massachusetts, like California is of course sun country. It's like you guys had the best programs for years. Massachusetts is actually like not that far behind California as far as what the incentives were. So there's some decent incentives that you can get that knock off the cost of what the system will be out of pocket. And then there's the federal tax rebate that you can get, which knocks 30% off your how much you owe on your taxes that you can claim. So when you're talking about like if you're installing a system that's $30,000, you're knocking $10,000 right off the bat because of the federal tax credit. And then my state knocks, another $7,000 off of that. So before you know it, the cost of the system just got way more affordable. So that loan we talked about is much smaller at the end of the day. So there's a lot of beneficial programs out there, but it varies state to state. Some states offer nothing, like absolutely nothing. So it really depends on where you live.
Did you pair, I'm assuming you did, your solar system with a battery?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm personally a believer in solar and batteries, or like it's peanut butter and chocolate. They go together so well. You got to have them both.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a Tesla Powerwall, and, it's great. Power goes off, you're protected, but it's also great because you can collect energy even if you don't collect it from the sun, you can collect it during off-peak hours. And so for us, if you look at, we have these 3 different prices. We never pay for anything other than the lowest price because we're either producing it from solar or we've stored it on the battery. Now, at 11:59 p.m., is the battery drained enough that if something were to happen and the power went out, we would be, we wouldn't have a full battery? Yes. It's kind of a risk, I guess, we're willing to take, but the battery is really helpful to shave that peak cost off.
But do you have power going out that much?
No, we don't have power. But there are a lot of places where, that's the risk, is if your power goes out and your battery's low because you were using it to kind of collect cheaper energy, that would be the problem. And to fix that, I guess you could have 2 batteries or just not worry about it.
Or in the case of the Tesla, because I had a Tesla Powerwall at my old house, they have the, when a weather alert comes out, the system automatically charges itself up. So it's like if you had time of use rates and there was a weather alert, the weather alert would override the time of use rates to make sure that you have enough power for that power outage that might happen because of big storms coming in.
And how do you generally think about that? You've got Tesla Powerwalls, Tesla solar roofs. What do you think? It sounds like you don't have either of those in this new house.
No, I went with a different brand. We went with Enphase, which is a major solar company. They have their own battery system. We had an Enphase solar at the old house with a Tesla Powerwall. This house is Enphase solar with an Enphase battery system. And part of the reason I did that, not solar, Tesla Powerwall, was because of the integration between the battery system and the solar system. The way they integrate with each other is pretty cool and very sophisticated. So I wanted to go that route. It also meant that we didn't need to get as much battery as we might need to otherwise, because kind of tying back to the span, there's all these benefits that you can get where if you have smart energy monitoring that can control how energy is being used and when, and then these smart systems between the solar and the battery, the way they work, it doesn't mean that you need 40 kilowatt hours of storage. You might only need 20 because it's very smart and intelligent about how it uses the energy storage, which saves you money. So it's like you spend more on you might be spending $7,000 or something on the span panel, but you're saving $15,000 because you don't need as many batteries.
Yeah. Or the way I'm thinking about this now is I have a friend who is thinking about getting solar right now. And he was telling me how much solar he needed. And I was like, whoa. Now I'm thinking, before you go through the process of solar or batteries, go through everything we talked about before, whether you want to upgrade your heating system, whether you want to start replacing your light bulbs, like go through the process to dial in how much energy your home needs and bring that down as much before you jump into the process of how many panels do I need or how big of a battery do I need to support the house.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's like I've had people come to me and say, hey, man, I'm looking to get this solar panel system. And it's like they show me, like they live in a large house and they share the plan with me. And it's something like, a 30 kilowatt solar panel system is like, that is bonkers huge. And it's like, well, how much energy are you using? It's like, well, we have 2 EVs and we have all this stuff. It's like, well, if you replaced all this stuff, you could probably cut your energy use down by 30%, which means you need a smaller solar panel system. You absolutely are right. You need to start with trying to figure out exactly how much you can reduce your energy use. And then that's the number you're trying to achieve.
Is there anything on the horizon or stuff that's come out really recently that's worth bringing up? Because I used to stay on top of tech stuff, but not energy stuff. Is there like some new technology or product or something that you're really excited about in the next few years?
Oh, there's a few really cool things. One of which is going back to water heaters. There's something called phase change materials that are basically thermal batteries. You put energy into it, it changes the material. Think about like water goes through a phase change when it turns into steam. So you have a phase change material, it's like a wax. So it's kind of like a solid, and then it becomes kind of like this soft liquidy material. So there's these, it almost looks like the size of a instant water heater. It's a small little box, and it's made by a company called SunAmp. And you basically have an electric resistive heater inside of it that charges the battery. And then when you need hot water, cold water just passes through some tubes, the phase change material, and heats up. You got hot water. And it's crazy efficient. And that's just hitting the US market now. It's been in Europe, but it's just hitting the market here now. Another one is new battery tech that's going to make home batteries cheaper and last longer. There's something called a flow battery. There's a company that's trying to bring this flow battery to market that would be about the size of a small refrigerator that you could just drop off the back of your house. It's 40 kilowatt hours of storage, and it would be price competitive to I think they said a single Powerwall. And it's got dramatically more storage, and a flow battery can last you decades. So it's like you'd never have to change its battery. You'd buy it and it would work for you for the next 20, 30 years. Where a Powerwall is going to probably hit end of life after a decade or need to be swapped out.
I've also heard that one of the cheapest home batteries out there is the Ford F-150 Lightning.
Yeah, I know. You can power your house off that thing for like a week or something ridiculous because the battery pack is so big.
Well, someone did a comparison. They said to get the battery capacity of the Ford F-150 in Tesla Powerwalls, you'd spend more than you would. So it's like, but with the Ford F-150, you also get a truck. Like you get more battery charging for a less cost and a truck. And I have at least one friend who I'm in this group of kind of nerdy tech dads. And he was like, I think I'm just going to buy a truck. Like, he lives in a place where having an extra car is not a hassle. And yes, you got to register it and insure it and all that kind of stuff. But, so he was like, I get a car and the batteries, and it ended up being a much better deal than adding on more Powerwalls.
That's another piece of tech that I'm excited about. It's called vehicle to grid or vehicle to load. It's like when you have an EV that has bidirectional charging. So when you plug it in, it can take power, but it can also give power. It's like my Tesla Model 3 that I've got, it's the largest battery I have in my house. It's like a 60 something kilowatt hour battery. It's like, if I could plug that into my house, I may not need a battery system like a Powerwall or an Enphase battery, because you have so much in your car right there.
As a multi-Tesla owning family, do you think that's something that can come to these cars without modification, or is it going to take a lot?
That's a really good question. I have no idea. When it comes to Tesla specifically, they're like the one company, they're the elephant in the room when it comes to vehicle to grid. It's like every other EV company is starting to roll this stuff out. They're the ones that are like basically not doing it. And part of the reason for that, I think, is because they have the Powerwall and they don't want to eat into that market. But at some point they'll do it. I have a feeling it's going to require a hardware change. So if you have an older Tesla, it may not be able to do this.
But on this note, the new iPhone 15s that have come out with USB-C ports now allow you to use your phone to charge your AirPods. So
I love that.
Apple is doing this already also. Yep. And speaking of Apple and technology and stuff, let's move a little bit. Home energy savings. We talked about saving energy. We talked about producing your own with an end goal of both security, but also hopefully some savings. The next big category that I know you thought a lot about in your home that is kind of the opposite. It's usually where you end up spending more money than saving money, is all around smart home and home automation. And I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes here in the past few years. And I'm curious how you just broadly thought about a strategy, because I've pieced mine together over time, but you just have a new home and you probably got the chance to think about every decision from the beginning. How did you do that?
Yeah, I was in the same boat in my old house. It was such a piecemeal patchwork of insanity that it was so easy to break. So when I was building this house, it was, what is my favorite? What are the things I'm trying to do? And what is the tech that will work together the best? And thankfully in the smart home market right now, there's a new system called Matter, which is kind of this broadly used system across all, like Google, Apple, Amazon, everybody's bought into it. So if you buy new smart home tech that is Matter certified, it will work with pretty much any system. It works locally. It's going to be very secure. So it's like, if you're a privacy-centric person that only wants locally controlled smart home tech, Matter devices can do that for you. If you want to jump between Apple HomeKit or Google Home or Amazon, it's like these devices will interoperate. That's been one of the biggest problems up until this point. So for my new house, I was thinking along those lines of, I only want to get products that are really locally controlled, are Matter certified, and kind of future proofed and will work together. But I also wanted to make sure I was only getting things that had a purpose. Like, I'm not a big fan of like, oh, I have a smart light that can turn red and green just because it can. It's like, that kind of stuff is like not what I was concerned with. It was more about smart light switches that can turn rooms off if nobody's there for a certain period of time, stuff like that.
Okay, and what is that light switch? Because the things we did here, maybe I'll share what we did. When we moved into this house, we replaced all the light switches with Lutron Cassetta lights, which at the time seemed like the best lighting automation system. Certainly doesn't sense what's happening anywhere. So that was one big change we made. And fortunately, the previous homeowner had done a lot of hardwiring. So we have a Ubiquiti Unify Wi-Fi system, and including Unify cameras that are mostly run hardwired. Those are the two big pieces. But I'm curious, from your side, what were the components that you thought were actually useful and important in your system?
Well, the first one was lighting, and we went with Lutron for the new house. Lutron is the only smart home device I've ever used that has been rock solid. Never had a problem. Never failed me in any way, shape, or form. It works with every system that's out there. It is like the cream of the crop as far as I'm concerned. So when I moved in here, I got all the Lutron cassette for all the switches. And then because it ties into any system, then I can basically automate things. I'm using Apple Home as my base, but I may actually be shifting that. But it's like I can set up automations for all this kind of stuff of if nobody's home, all the lights go off. If it's this time of night, certain lights go off. If it's, room is empty for a certain period of time, lights can go off. So it allows me to set up those automations in a rock solid way that just always works. And that was the first place I started.
Great. I feel great about my decision to do that because we have the same system. What about
Ubiquiti?
other?
I've got Ubiquiti Unify stuff everywhere too, because it's like, again, it's kind of like the cream of the crop when you're talking about security cameras, Wi-Fi, setting up home networks. It really is the best. It's the first time I've used it and I love it.
I can't think of the number of times in our last home I had to restart a router. I think the advantage of Unify system is I have not restarted our router in over a year.
Yep.
It might restart at night when no one's actively using it to upgrade the software. Maybe that's happening, but it is so solid that I just haven't had to do any restarting or anything. It's not the most consumer friendly to set up, and I think they're getting better there, but that's been solid. And then almost every home internet plan is now unlimited, so it doesn't really matter, but it is nice that all the cameras are local. So we've just got a massive hard drive in our kind of what's called a Dream Machine Pro, similar probably to what you have. And you can still stream your cameras from anywhere, but you're not constantly using your bandwidth to stream, 9 cameras to the cloud and storing them on someone else's server, which just eats into your, bandwidth use.
And on top of which, it's recording all the time. So it's like these Wi-Fi cameras you can get super cheap. It's like, you may miss the first 30 seconds of a motion event that was recorded because it took a while for the camera to realize something was happening before it recorded it, where the Ubiquiti stuff is just recording all the time. So it's like if you need to scroll back 2 minutes before an event, you can see exactly what's going on. It's definitely, I feel like I've bought into the top tier kind of stuff. And if you have rogue devices that are using a lot of bandwidth, that's another thing I noticed is that the Dream Machine shows you per client. So it shows how much bandwidth each thing is using. So if you're trying to track down, why is my bandwidth use so high? Oh, there's this one computer that I forgot was on and it's doing something crazy in the background. You can track that kind of stuff down too.
Yeah. The analytics are really interesting. You could nerd out about it. And I certainly have. I don't know if you have to. What other platforms are you using? Are you doing things for locks?
Yeah, I have a Slage, smart door locks that tie into my Apple HomeKit system. I use Apple Watches. So it's like we can just walk up to the door, put our watch to the door, and the door opens. Super nice to have. I don't like carrying keys anymore, and this makes it super easy. But yeah, it's like I said, we're kind of focused on Apple Home because we're an Apple household. But I'm looking at other systems like there's Home Assistant, which is kind of a super geeky, nerdy, free open source system that you can get that I've been playing with. Not user friendly compared to something like Apple, but it's very, very powerful and can do whatever you want. And there's other systems coming online. Like there's one called Homey from Europe that's just hitting the US market now that is crazy, powerful and really easy to use. Has a user interface that is fantastic. So it's great to see options like that hit in the market too.
My biggest piece of advice to anyone listening that likes to kind of nerd out is unless you're 100% sure, don't make your home smart home and security system, everything DIY because it's fun. Because I feel like I did this in our last home and we bought this device called Connected and we used all of the legacy security system hardwired things, brought it online, tied it into smart things. And we had basically a DIY home security system that tied into this third party that would monitor it. But it was all just, with your home security system, do you really want it to all be DIY and based off some scripts that you wrote about what to do? And I thought it was so cool because it would, allow you to pre-program something for your Sonos speakers to say if someone broke in and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I just didn't really trust that it was actually going to work because I had put it all together myself. And we switched to Ring. and we're using Ring for home security. Very happy. But I hate that we have one platform for security, a different platform for locks, a different platform for cameras. And my question is, should I just get over that and accept that if they all tie in to the same platform, it doesn't really matter if your light switches and your plugs and your door locks are all different?
I would say, yeah, you need to get over it a little bit in the short term. But in the long term, the thing I mentioned about Matter, that is going to slowly become the industry standard across everything. So at some point, you'll be able to get some kind of security system like a Ring system that will, as a paid service, that you're getting kind of like that monitored for you kind of a thing. And it will just work with everything, can work with multiple platforms at once. But yeah, you kind of have to get over it. As long as it all ties into one central place, that's the most important thing. So it's like if you're a Google user and you want it to all go into Google so that on your phone, it's all in one location, like all your cameras show up here, all your security stuff shows up in the app, even if it's Ring doing the security side, that's ultimately what's going to make it more user-friendly. And I'd call out, for me, the wife acceptance factor, the WAF. It's like doing the DIY stuff is fun because I'm a geek. I like to nerd out and do that stuff. But I had set up stuff on my old house that if something broke, my wife could never fix it. She would not know where to start. And so it was all on me to fix it, which is the stuff I'm trying to avoid in this house. I'm trying to get it set up in a way that she would be comfortable going in there and messing with automations and in a user interface that's really easy to understand and use. So it's like you have to think about the other people in your house as well. So otherwise, you're going to run into problems.
Yeah, and there's one company that I thought was really interesting that we didn't end up using because we'd already wired all these cameras. I don't know if you've seen Deep Sentinel. So Deep Sentinel is a security platform that the friends I know that have used it love it. And it's similar to a home security system with cameras, except they have people that are live monitoring the cameras. So someone walks up to your porch to take a package and someone on the speaker is live seeing motion and talking to the person without you there. So it's almost like as if you have a remote security manager. You know, you see all these movies where like in some rich person's house, there's a room where a guy sits with all the cameras and is ready to go. It's that, except that person's monitoring probably hundreds of homes from one chair somewhere else. And so it's actually not just monitored like police station will come, but person will be watching the cameras and be able to proactively do things, whether it's talk or call the authorities or something like that.
Wow, that's kind of neat. And there's also a little bit of a creepy factor to it to know that somebody is watching my cameras. There's something a little odd about that, but it's also pretty cool.
Yeah, I think if they ever plug in like that service, if it could plug into an existing set of cameras, would be more interesting than buying a whole set of new cameras for the home for all this stuff. Have you done a lot with smart home sensors just around the house to monitor different things, whether it's temperature, humidity, leaks, that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, like in this house, the house is so airtight that it needs something called an energy recovery ventilator that's always bringing in fresh outside air and exhausting stale inside air. And as the two pass, it's recovering the heat between them. So it keeps the energy inside the house, but it's giving you constant fresh air. A concern with a system like that is humidity levels might get too high or CO2 levels might get kind of high. So I've got sensors all over this house that are just monitoring temperature, humidity, and CO2 and particulate matter, all that kind of stuff. And I'm setting up automations in my house so that if CO2 levels get too high, the ERV will just ramp up a little bit just to make sure that air is changing as it needs to. So I definitely am in the sensor game. I'm got them all over the place. And sensors for like if a door is open or closed. I kind of freaked out the electricians that were here the other day because they went to open the door to the mechanical room. They'd opened the door and the light was on. And they were like, that's weird. And they closed it and they noticed under the gap of the door, the light went off. And then they stood there for a few minutes, just open the door, closing the door, open the door, closing the door. And they didn't understand what was going on. And I came around the corner and they were like, did you do something here? And I was like, yeah, there's a door sensor. If you see over there, there's a little door sensor. It's acting like a refrigerator. So it's like the light comes automatically because the room's a dark cave. You have to turn the light on. So why not just automate it with a sensor?
And what did that automation? Was that in Apple's home product?
Yeah, I bought a Matter certified door sensor. That's just this little door sensor that uses something called Thread as its network. And it's linked it directly into the home app. And then I just set up an automation that said, if door open, turn light on. If door closed, turn light off.
Super interesting. I have a room that needs this. It's like a dark room that every time, and the light switch is so poorly located that you have to like reach around stuff. So that's next on the list. But then I'm like, gosh, couldn't we just use the Ring sensors that we have on all these doors already? But I think Ring is kind of private in that way. Did you do anything for security in your house?
Not yet. Because I'm Apple, I'm looking at a system called Abode, which is similar to Ring, but it ties directly into Apple HomeKit. So it's like any sensors I would add could then show up in Apple Home, and I could use them for different automations. So that's part of the reason I'm looking at that system.
Any other smart home things I'm forgetting that you've thought about in this new house?
I'm doing I'm Lutron Serena shades throughout my house. And so it's the same thing. It's like that's the cost of the shades will never return on investment. So don't take this with a grain of salt. But I am going to be using these shades with some automations to help reduce energy costs, because sun beaming in your house, if you're trying to keep it cool, warms the room. So it's like I'm going to be setting up automations based on light level, time of day, stuff like that, temperature of the room, where it could automatically drop the shades halfway if it's close to sunset to keep a room from getting too hot. I'll be doing stuff like that.
Yeah, we bought Bali blinds through Costco, and they're kind of like a DIY setup. And I can't explain why, but like one of them just never works. And it's never the same one. It always like it. So I can't say I support the system, but I think it was probably a third of the cost of the Serena shade. So like, if you're okay that maybe one shade doesn't work sometimes, it could be a good way to save. But I will say that we have it on automations. Right now we're on Google Home, and it'll just drop the shades in the morning. I think you can even time shift it from sunrise and sunset, so you don't have to kind of constantly change the schedule. Raise the shades on one side of the house, drop the shades on the other. It's not quite smart enough to know seasonally, like where is the sun in the morning, right? In half the year, it's coming from one side of the house, half the year it's on the other, but it's pretty good.
Comes back to the sensors. Some of these motion sensors also are light sensors. So if they're detecting like the lumens of the room, it's like you can say, if the light level is higher than this, drop the shades. So it's like you can set it that way to give it a little more smarts. And I would also call out IKEA has some really cheap smart shades. The company Eve also has their version of smart shades that are much cheaper than Serena. The Lutron Serena is the most expensive, but I went with them because just like the light switches, rock solid. They always work. There's never an issue with them. They get kind of the highest marks you can get, but you of course are paying for it because they're more expensive.
But those could, like, if you don't have, like, I see the replacement of our shades in the future for these automated ones. Like, it just feels like that's coming. So, at the end of the day, 10 years from now, you're going to probably have the same shades, and I might have swapped them out. So you might have saved some money.
Yeah, perhaps.
This is great. Yeah, I've tried to avoid going down the home assistant, home everything path of trying to hack together things on Raspberry Pis to make it all work. And it's a little promising as an Apple family that maybe we could do it all with Apple Home. And maybe we just need to run something to tie a few things together, but maybe we'll get there soon. One random question, which I saved because I just thought you would have an opinion. Do you use like AA, AAA rechargeable batteries at home, or have you given up on rechargeable batteries? Because I feel like we bought all these like Eneloop batteries at one point, and I feel like they just don't hold a charge. And am I missing something?
You're not missing something. We switched 100% to rechargeable batteries, and there are some devices we use where it feels like we have to change them every month. It's like bananas. But it's because lithium ion batteries don't hold a voltage the same way as like an alkaline battery or a non-rechargeable lithium ion battery. So it's a voltage issue. So if you buy batteries you have to dispose of, they'll last you 6 months or a year, where the rechargeable ones only go every 30 days. It's incredibly frustrating, but I use them wherever I can. And I try to avoid having to buy disposable batteries whenever I can. But I've gone back to it because it's unavoidable.
Yeah, I would love to avoid that. But door locks are one where when we use rechargeable batteries on door locks, it just feels like it's a security risk because you leave town for a week and your batteries might die while you're gone.
Exactly. You buy the disposable one and it'll be good for a year, but you put the Eneloops in and they're dead in 6 weeks. It's frustrating.
Any other random thoughts? I mean, we've covered a lot, but before we wrap, on things that you thought about when you built this new home that, you wish you had maybe known about or thought about earlier, or would recommend other people consider if they're retrofitting or building a home?
This may be kind of a cop out of an answer, but I would say I actually just did a video on this recently. Keep it simple, stupid. The KISS rule. Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple, because as we talked about in the beginning, it's like one of the first things you should do is look into like energy systems, like energy advisors in your area. The simplest thing you could do might be just put some extra insulation in the attic, and that will save you an incredible amount of money. You don't have to jump through all the hoops, get all the crazy new smart home gear, get out Home Assistant, do crazy smart home stuff to save money on your home. Just keep it simple.
I like it. Yeah. I think every time I put together a system that relied on like some Android tablet or some Raspberry Pi, I've never ended up keeping using it. So I support that advice. And this has been great. I have a few things I need to go find one of these advisors. So that's my next step. And see how airtight our home is, I guess, is the first step. What the big options are, because we actually considered, do we need another battery? And now I'm wondering, maybe we don't. Before we wrap, I know I've watched a ton of these videos. Where should people find your home base to see everything you're working on and to go deeper on any of the things we talked about?
If you go to undecidedmf.com, that's my website. It's got my YouTube videos on there, articles we're writing. It's got everything. Central location would be there, including the podcasts.
Awesome. Yeah, I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes. Keep the KISS method in mind as you're going down the rabbit hole of Matt's videos. I focus on the big areas, and I think you could probably find a lot of savings. And I know you've got a lot of home automation and smart home videos coming soon on this new house, and I'm very excited to check them out.
Awesome.